Iets oor. Hang up.
Wow, South Africa. That is a bucket list trip, especially if you've never been on the continent of Africa before. I had been to Kenya once before this trip, but my husband had not been. So we were very excited to go on this trip. The reason we chose to go here is because it was summer, and we have gone on some trips in the summer that were miserable and hot, and we've decided, okay, now, if we travel in the summer, we're going to go somewhere cool. We're going to go to the Southern Hemisphere or super far north like Alaska. So we went to South Africa in July. The weather was beautiful. I probably could have used a couple more long sleeve shirts. I did bring a windbreaker, so keep that in mind when packing. So we kind of naively just flew to Johannesburg. we didn't really, we planned our trip ahead of time, but we just thought it was like, any other place you go, you rent a car, book a hotel, and go for it. And was that a good idea? Would it have been better if we had gotten a guide? Or maybe gone on a tour? On hindsight, I found out that, or after we already were on our trip, we kind of figured out that most people don't just go to South Africa on a vacation or on a trip. Most people have a guide or a tour. So let's tell you how it went. Well, first of all, we flew to South Africa. That is a long flight. We flew from Dallas to Atlanta, I believe it was, and then Atlanta on to South Africa. And so that Atlanta, South Africa flight was something like 14, 15 hours. It was a long flight there, long flight back. But flight was good. We got to the airport, and we weren't sure 100% what to do. We stopped by the cash machine, got some money, got some rand. Probably didn't get enough. So that's a clue. That's something, is to get a little bit of extra money than you think you might need. Remember, you're going to be leaving lots of tips, things like that. And our credit card didn't work in South Africa. Our American Express didn't work, and neither did our debit card. And those were the only two we had at the time, and they did not work in South Africa. Our debit card did work in the ATM machine. So be sure and get plenty of cash. Right off the bat, it was a little scary. We were renting a car. And so we were walking through the airport, going to the car rental, and somebody said they would help us. They would walk with, and we're like, we're okay. We don't need your help. There's a sign right there. We'll go. And he kind of had an official looking outfit on, and like an official airport greeter kind of person. He just kind of kept walking with us as we were walking to our rental car. And, we weren't sure what to do. But when we got to the rental car counter, he kind of expected a tip. And we didn't feel like we needed to give him one because we didn't ask him to escort us. So I don't know if I made a mistake or not, but we did not give him a tip. We rented our car, which we had prearranged. The cars in most other countries are not automatics. They're manual transmissions. Okay, so I would not be able to drive an automatic transmission, but my husband is able to. But then you're driving on the other side of the road. So automatic transmission and the other side of the road. So that was a challenge, but It was, after a while, my husband got used to it, and it was, that part of it was okay. We were staying at a hotel near the airport on the first night. Here's the name of the hotel. That was a wonderful experience, a great hotel. It was a little challenging to find. Thank goodness our GPS worked on our phones and worked for us the whole time we were in South Africa. So I was very thankful for that. We got to the hotel, and I think we flew in at like 7 p.m. So we probably got to the hotel about 10 p.m. Spent the night there. Very nice hotel. I would highly recommend it. The South African rand is not very strong and against the US dollar, so things were not very expensive there. Definitely maybe about half of what you would expect to pay in the US for a nice hotel. The hotel had breakfast there the next morning to go along with the room, and I got to try sorghum porridge, which is a very typical South African breakfast. And it was delicious. It was very, very good. But they had everything, you know, eggs and meat and, you know, just things that you would normally expect at a breakfast buffet. So then we were headed to our safari lodge. So we had just booked this online. I went into Google and just booked like Safari Lodge near Johannesburg, and African Hills Safari Lodge came up, and it looked nice. It looked great. The prices were good. So we said, okay, let's just book that one. So that's the one we booked, and it took a little effort to get it booked. You had to, it wasn't like you could just book it online. You kind of had to call them, and they had to send you some sort of documentation to verify your credit card, and there was a little bit of a process to get that done, but we got that done ahead of time. So the next day we got to the Safari Lodge. Now, driving in Johannesburg, very interesting. Johannesburg does not have the infrastructure like we have in the United States, so roads are not as good. About 50% of the traffic lights do not work. So it was just a little bit more of a free-for-all on the roads. There weren't always, you know, there weren't always lanes, and people didn't always stay in lanes. And as we were driving to the safari park, we got pulled over. There was just sort of like a stop, like everyone was being pulled over. And so we were pulled over, and they were really surprised that these Americans had rented a car and were driving around South Africa. And so you know, we were surprised that they were surprised, but anyway, we continued on our journey. And the first animals that we saw some baboons just like running across the road, and that was just like, what, look. That was amazing. They were so quick I didn't get a picture. Then we drove into the lodge, which was beautiful, and I have lots and lots of pictures here of the lodge. The lodge was incredible. It was kind of a dream. I can't even say enough about this little lodge. I would highly recommend it. Again, we were there, I think it was maybe a Thursday night, and so there was hardly anybody there. There were some groups from, like, some maybe corporate groups, like on, you know, team building or things like that was leaving that day. And then I think on the second and third night, there maybe were some other groups, some other safari tours or group tours that came through. On the weekend, some more like local people who probably lived in South Africa came to spend the weekend. So there were people there, but it was not at all crowded. There were lots and lots of things to do. Just walking the property was glorious. I mean, it was so neat to just randomly see animals. There was a spa, and we had purchased a package that included a massage, and that was very nice. There was, you could go on safari rides where they would take you in the big jeeps and take you out and show you all the animals, or look for the animals. And they're just kind of wherever they want to be. They stopped about halfway through, and we got some nice tea and biscuits. There was a hike that my husband went on that looked at petroglyphs, things like that. The elephant experience was absolutely incredible. It was unlike anything I could ever imagine. We were so close to the elephants. We were able to touch them, not like pet them, but we were able to feed them. And we were so close. The most exciting thing was, here's the video of it, where we would hold a piece of apple in our mouth, and the elephant would take that piece of apple out of our mouths and then proceed to eat it. And so after that experience, you've got mud all over your face. I was like the second person to do it, and I did not at all expect the mud. I saw them, they had like a mirror and baby wipes, and I'm like, what is going on? You needed the mirror and baby wipes to get all the elephant snot and dirt off of your face. It was, it was an experience I will absolutely never forget. It was remarkable, absolutely remarkable. Before this experience, they showed us a video about the elephants that they're using for this experience, and we got to learn about all the elephants in Africa that because of agriculture, they can almost be a nuisance, because you need a lot of land for one elephant. And so if there's too many elephants, they just decimate the land. And so if they're not being called, then there are problems. And the more agriculture that there is, this becomes more and more of a problem. So basically they're just killed. Well, this group of, this individual and this group were taking those elephants who would have been called and instead training them, because they felt like elephants could be trained. And so they trained them for different purposes. And in this case, these elephants came from that elephant school. So the school is no longer open, but these elephants live a long time, and so they're going to be part of this program as long as this program is able to exist. So that was incredible. That was definitely a highlight of the trip. The food was incredible. We had, one of the things that my husband found that he absolutely loved was malva pudding. And I actually made it once when we got back home for him. I made it for him, and he loved that. I think he had that for dessert every night. One of the nights we ate ostrich steaks. I'm thinking ostrich, it's gonna be like chicken. It was not. It was like beef. It was so interesting. So it was delicious. It was like a very lean beef. Just being on that property, sitting around, there were museums right there on the property to go and see. There was just so much to do. 3 days was just enough. Maybe a fourth day would have been even better. It wasn't a huge property, so I don't know if a whole week, unless you just were enjoying time relaxing. But there wasn't maybe enough activities to keep you busy for a week. The hotel rooms were like these little cottages. And so they were very nice. They had everything that you could want, a boiler, a kettle boiler with tea, and they had these beautiful clawfoot baths. They also had a nice shower. They had air conditioners, heater, whatever you needed. The internet and even the power were not totally reliable. So there would be 2 or 3 hours at a time where you wouldn't have power. And I think that's just typical for South Africa. Like I said, there's just not as good of an infrastructure as we have. So they're used to the power just randomly going out for 2 or 3 hours here and there. And so, we're not. We're not used to that. And so that could be a little frustrating. But I think it was just par for the course. It was just something that you just kind of had to get used to there. We left the lodge in the morning, and then we didn't have to be to the airport until later that evening. So we had some time to do something in Johannesburg. So we went to the Apartheid Museum. Absolutely incredible experience. If you go to Johannesburg, this is a must do. Even if you're just in Johannesburg shortly, maybe on a layover, or for some other reason you're just there for the day, you need to go to the Apartheid Museum. It's a very impactful experience. It really teaches you about the whole, everything that occurred in South Africa and how recently it occurred. And you just come away with a much better understanding of exactly what happened in South Africa. And you learn a lot about Nelson Mandela. There was also a Desmond Tutu display there as well, exhibit, what we got to see. Very, very good. As far as just driving around in South Africa, it was interesting that, we would drive in areas and it felt like LA. There were palm trees, there were houses up on cliffs, and it was incredible, beautiful roads with, working stoplights, and it just sort of felt like you were in America. Our GPS brought us through several different areas. We went a different way to the lodge than when we came back. So when we came back, our GPS took us through very wealthy areas, and it also took us through very poor areas. And we just got to see that huge dichotomy, that huge difference. I was a little nervous to be driving through those neighborhoods that were very, very poor. It was just, you could just see miles and miles and miles of these almost like shacks, just, very minor structures put together that people were living in. And so there's a very wide gap from the wealthy and the not wealthy in South Africa, and that is still existing today. Well, so was it a good idea? Should we have gone without a guide, without a tour? In hindsight, we probably should have had a tour. We probably should have done all this on a tour. We were just kind of naive and just went and traveled like we would anywhere else. And, it was okay. We got home safely. We didn't really run into any problems. But I think it comes down to you. If you're sort of an adventurous person and don't mind just sort of going and seeing how it goes, then you'll probably be fine. If you're a person who wants things very organized and you don't want to have to try to get yourself from point A to point B, then I would hire a guide. I would say I watched several other videos on YouTube, and I would say almost everybody, not everybody, but well over 50% of the people have a guide. They hire guides for either specific parts of their trip, or they hire a guide for the whole trip. So that might have been, or to go on a tour. I think most of the people that I know that have been to Africa, any part of Africa, have gone on a tour, like they went with a tour group. And that's probably the wisest, safest thing to do. But, we did it and we were okay, and we had a wonderful time. At some point you want to go to the continent of Africa. You want to check that bucket list item, that continent off of your list. And we did that, and we did it fairly inexpensively, and we did it without any sort of guides. Thank you so much for listening. This channel is Dudley Doesn't Get to Go because our sweet dog Dudley doesn't get to travel with us. Thank you so much for watching. I'd love it if you would subscribe or maybe make a comment and hopefully like this video. Thanks, and you have a wonderful day.